Hey, psych kids. I'm back. Thanks for listening to my last long-winded, rambling diatribe. If you take a look at me closely here, you can see the hair. I'm shaving, but by and large, the brain is fried. Ladies, those of you that can make it, we'll do a 10 a.m. get together tomorrow just to chat, just to see how things are going. It's kind of the end of the semester. So I'm going to keep doing psych videos because we got some juniors and some seniors who might not be able to leave the house. So it's fun for me to do these things. It was really sad to be up at school when the senior girls came through. It's just this lockdown. I'm gonna tell you, I think this lockdown is just the dumbest thing we have ever done as a country. The economic fallout, and by the way, I'm on the record as being anti-lockdown from day one. It was fun for like a couple weeks. Like I was all about it for 2 weeks. You go get everybody home, get the elderly to safe quarters, get them stocked up on groceries, get a sort of a plan for how to take care of our immunocompromised people so that they don't have to leave the house, So if you got neighbors on your block, everybody chips in, does the food shopping for them or whatever. But after a couple weeks, it's like, come on, give me a break. So I hope things have been okay. I'm sorry you lost your large part of your senior year, or if you're seniors, that is just ridiculous. Just so you know, I would have been there. I would have showed up to school. Coronavirus, no coronavirus. I'm 53 years old. I think I'm all right. But I'm bummed. I'm bummed that a lot of you lost your senior year. You juniors, it is awesome. You're coming back. I can't wait to see you next year. And we'll laugh about all this as long as we don't do another stupid shutdown. And by the way, I'm not blaming the school for that at all. They are doing what the country's doing. I think the country, our school kind of had to. There's no way around that. Everybody did. I get it. I'm not saying anybody had any. I don't think anybody knew what to do. So when I say it's stupid, it's not like I would have made a better decision. It just hindsight right now. It's like, boy, the economics of it. But I hope everybody's done well. Hope your families have done okay and they're surviving through this thing. It's time for us to open everything back up, which it looks like it's coming. It's right around the corner. Again, you're getting some rambling. Anyway, I think we left off at PTSD and the sensitive limbic system, the emotion, motivation, and long-term memory stuff that comes out of your limbic system wreaks havoc, particularly with sleep, with PTSD sufferers. We do have a couple good drugs. Trazodone is one to help them with the sleep. And of course, the article you read about psilocybin talks about the prospective use. One of the things about psilocybin, when we talk about this, and I see tremendous clinical benefit of a drug like that, and I endorse it as a clinical drug, a drug that you go to a doctor's office and the doctor administers the drug to you. And that way, if something, because you can get what's called a bad trip, you're going to be confronting, the patient would be confronting some scary stuff. And so it's important when we talk about the potentiality of a drug like psilocybin for PTSD, for depression, for anxiety. That's clinical. Clinical. If one of you, I have a number of kids that have reached out that have struggled with anxiety through this whole thing, and they have their whole life. And if one of you signed up for a clinical, trial with this, I'd be ecstatic. I'd love to hear about it. But that's the key, clinical. In a clinical setting where the doctors are aware of everything that can and possibly will happen. That's important. So anyway, that's a caveat to that. We talked about like dissociative identity disorder, which is just, ridiculous. I'm of the opinion that there has never been a real case of this in history. I don't believe that this has ever happened. Some people, I do have a master's in psych. I don't have my PhD. But I have looked at this stuff pretty closely, and I do not believe that the individual has a dissociation with one consciousness and goes into another consciousness. I don't believe that at all. I believe in dissociative fugue. I've read a couple cases of fugue where that makes sense, where you kind of blank out and we find you a few years later. That makes sense. But a bunch of personalities, that's ridiculous and fake. You heard it here first. All make believe. The cases that the movies have been made about are the research on them is sketchy at best. Because I got real into when I saw Sybil when I was a kid. I started researching all about that, and everything I came across, I was like, well, it doesn't look like what it's presenting as. This person just goes in and out of personalities. That's just a really weird thing. To me, it doesn't add up. But then again, I'm not the end all. So it's, I teach it. Dissociative identity disorder, we teach it. I believe it's fake. It might not be. Dissociative fugue, very different. Very different. So, this brings us to like bipolar, the next abnormal area that I'll talk about. Bipolar, the key word to bipolar, to understanding bipolar disorder, is the understanding of a term called mania. And the thing about bipolar disorder is you have an individual who has extremely high highs and extremely low lows. Mark Twain, Ernest Hemingway, two that I can think of off the top of my head. They would write during those highs, and then they would just go kind of catatonic. And Hemingway in those lows was like inconsolable. He was just not creative. Sometimes, actually, there were times where he was a bit creative, but it was during those highs where he was able to produce a ton of stuff. Same with Twain. But there's this mania is what we call a wildly optimistic state. So the individual that is bipolar, when they are in this wildly optimistic state, are very fun to be around. I've known someone with severe bipolar, and it's crazy the difference between when they're up and then when they're down. You don't even see them for 2 weeks, a month. So one of the issues with this is, if you have bipolar, or if someone has bipolar disorder, they're hesitant to take their medications because the medications tend to get you a flat line. You don't experience those deep lows, but you also don't experience those high highs. And that's why people, you very often hear when you're talking to someone who has bipolar, how much they often they dislike their medication. We are starting to work with medications that can, a lot of the newer medications, they tone down the highs, but they don't take it to this sort of, more baseline low or middle, which they're not used to. So we try and keep them on their meds. The same goes with my next topic, which is schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a dopamine thing. Typically there's too much dopamine in the system, and you hear things or see things or any hallucinations. So you can hear, see any of the senses, you hallucinate. Now, there is something, like a catatonic schizophrenia, where the individual sort of becomes catatonic. The one that you're most familiar with would be like a paranoid schizophrenia. And that's the one where the individual feels as if and hears or hallucinates regarding people, saying things they're not saying, or trying or following them, or they hear things that aren't there. That is very different from the catatonic form of schizophrenia. And the paranoid schizophrenia is that is something that we see. Where do I see it? There's a homeless individual about 3 blocks on Broadway, 3 blocks from my house, who will, constantly be speaking to people that are most likely, I'm going to just diagnose here, I'm not in a position to really diagnose this individual, but most likely this gentleman is talking to people that aren't there, hearing and having a full-on discussion. And sometimes he does get pretty violent, like he's throwing rocks and stuff at people across the street, and it's not that people are saying something, but he is hearing those things. They are real to him. Now, this is something that we see a lot of in the homeless population. Now, this is one of those, chicken or the egg things, but I like to believe that the individual became homeless because of the schizophrenia. I don't know of homelessness. Now, certainly drugs, hallucinogenic drugs can contribute to schizophrenia. So if you have this is very important, if you have family history of schizophrenia, and I'm sure all of you are going to stay away from hallucinogenic, all drugs, I believe you'll all stay away from them all. But definitely you have to stay away from the hallucinogenic drugs, the psilocybins, the peyote, lysergic acid, diethylamide, DMT. You gotta stay away from these, because one of the things we have seen is individuals with a propensity for schizophrenia can get that the drug experience can kick that into overdrive, and it can encourage the development of symptoms of schizophrenia. Now, with individuals that are already diagnosed with schizophrenia, they are working with certain hallucinogens to see if they can fix, to some extent, the schizophrenic, whichever form of schizophrenia the individual has. But you should be staying away from any kind of hallucinogen if you have a family history of schizophrenia, or, to be honest with you, any dissociative disorder. schizophrenia, any kind of depressive disorder, like a major depressive disorder, then drugs like alcohol can be, can further the problem. So I don't mean to ramble, but drugs are dangerous. Drugs can be very dangerous because you don't know what you have going on here. So you're going into these things blind. And how many of us know our family's history with depression? How many of us know, I mean, some of us do as you get older, but how many of us know about the uncle that had a dissociative fugue? How many of us, maybe even multiple personality disorder, even though I've said I don't believe it exists. How many of us know about the schizophrenic great-grandfather? I mean, these are the things you really have to be aware of before we start treating you with these kinds of drugs. A major depressive disorder, that's the last one I'll kind of talk about today. This is a situation where with the individual, they are unable to break out of a cycle of depression. And typically it comes with they have 5 major signs of depression. Okay? And these signs are things like an inability to enjoy social functions, often they will go 1 to 2 days of not getting out of bed. That's a big one with real depression, is the inability to just get out of bed. So when we have like a major depressive disorder, it's pretty easy to diagnose because we can really just go down a checklist and see where the individual stands. And at that point, with major depressive disorder, with schizophrenia, with dissociative disorders, we are always dealing in medication. Bipolar, we're always dealing, and there's a number of different medications that we use with these particular ailments. Anyway, I will, the next time I get with you, I'll talk to you a bit about the schools of thought of therapy. Like, what are the types of therapies that we have for addressing individuals with that are presenting some form of an abnormal psychology? So there's there's a bunch of different approaches to therapies. You have psychodynamic, you have cognitive behavioral therapies, you have whatever. I'll talk about it next. Humanist approach, I'm sorry. Although cognitive behavioral therapy is sort of the humanist approach, but unconditional positive regard. Anyway, I will talk to you about that in our next lecture. Girls, I welcome seeing you or hearing from you tomorrow at 10 a.m. And it's going to be a Microsoft Teams. I'm hoping my Teams works. If you sign on and it doesn't work, I apologize, but I think y'all got an invite. So I think it's working. Anyway, again, sorry to ramble. We are at the end of the year. We are. It is tricky. For a lot of you, might be you seniors. If you're feeling depressed right now, reach out to me, to anybody. This is a tough time. This is your graduation time. We love you as much as we would love you if we had a baccalaureate mass, and if you walked. You will always be in our heart. We will never forget this, seniors, ever. We will never forget you. We know that you lost your prom. We know that you lost your graduation. We know you lost that end of the year. And for the rest of your time, you will simply come back and you will be of the class of 2020. And we will always acknowledge the losing that stuff, and that's rough. And but we love you. Take care of yourselves.